Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of the Contrarian. We're delighted to have back with us Rushab Sanghvi. He is the general counsel of the American Federation of Government Employees. Welcome, Rushab. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for having me.
We have been in a shutdown mode now for just about 2 weeks. And then something extraordinary happened on Friday. What happened and what does that mean for government workers?
Yes, Jen. So I think as most have seen, the administration, through Russ vote, engaged in mass reductions in force on Friday afternoon, like they were threatening. These are unlawful reductions in force. And the way in which they've done them not only violates the law, but was so disrespectful to federal employees whose lives are dedicated to serving this country. I think, Russ vote initiated them by tweeting the rifts are beginning, something of that nature, which again is so disrespectful to these hardworking Americans.
And these are not furloughs, which is what we are used to. In a government shutdown, two categories of employees: essential workers who remain working but generally are not paid, and those who are furloughed, meaning they have to leave the workforce, but they will return, and in all previous shutdowns, they have been paid. They are doing something different. What is that, and why is this illegal?
Yes, sure, Jen. So yes, and we knew this was coming, right? A few weeks ago, OMB issued a memorandum, and it basically directed agencies to conduct RIFs during, or reductions in force, terminations, during the government shutdown. And the memo itself and all of the messaging they've been giving throughout this period has sort of demonstrated that what they're doing here is they're using our members and federal employees in general as political pawns, right? All of the messaging discusses why this is required because of the Democrats' intransigence and because of Congress's failure to pass a bill. So that's sort of one piece of it. We immediately saw that this plan was unlawful, and even before the rifts began, we filed a lawsuit with Norm Eisen and Democracy Defenders Fund and Democracy Forward and another labor union asked me in California to stop these rifts before they happen. We filed that lawsuit and we filed a motion for a temporary restraining order, which is scheduled to be heard tomorrow in San Francisco. In essence, there's several reasons we believe these rifts are unlawful and unprecedented, right? And that's part of the argument. I think you mentioned just now, right, that typically during a shutdown, there are two types of federal employees: those that are furloughed because there are no appropriations for them, and then those where there are no appropriations, but they are deemed essential. So they're protecting life, they're protecting property, they're safety employees. And so those are typically what happens to federal employees. There's a third set of employees who are have appropriations that are advanced and or are funded through other means, which those employees, they continue to work, but that's a sort of small subset of all federal employees. But so that's what happens, right? And the reason employees are furloughed is because this is a temporary lapse in appropriations, right? The government, because of there's a law called the Anti-Deficiency Act, and the government cannot obligate money that hasn't been appropriated by Congress. And so if Congress fails to pass a funding bill, there's no money to sort of obligate the payment that is required for these workers. And so then they're furloughed, and they're furloughed instead of terminated for a very important and sort of common sense reason. That is, we all know that this is not Congress eliminating functions, right? Congress is not saying, hey, we can't pass a spending bill, so there shouldn't be an EPA, there shouldn't be a HUD, there shouldn't be an SSA. What's happening is Congress is, those entities exist, those government agencies exist. Congress just hasn't come to an agreement on funding them and what level they'll be funded at. And so that's why the OMB guidance, current guidance, OPM guidance say the proper the appropriate next step is to furlough these employees, because we can't obligate their payment without that appropriations, but not to terminate them, because again, these agencies exist and these agencies will come back, to functioning once Congress passes a funding bill, and through that, we're going to need these employees again. And then there's those that are essential, right? You're not going to want, even if there's a small exception in the Anti-Deficiency Act that says, hey, if someone is essential, you can force them to work, even though you can't pay them, because you still want your law enforcement out there, you still want your air traffic controllers out there, you want to make sure safety is there. So that's sort of the background. And then what Russ Vought is doing here is he says, hey, because there's no funds, we can just terminate these people. And you know what? Because it takes a lot of human resources employees and other employees to actually process these terminations, we're going to deem all of those employees essential employees. And so it's ridiculous, and it's clearly a political move and a maneuver that's meant not to they know it's unlawful, right? Because one, like I said earlier, right, these agencies exist, right? So you're furloughing EPA employees because the EPA is going to exist when this impasse is done. Russ Vought is saying, oh, we don't have money for them, so that means that we can fire them because there's no agency anymore. But that's not true. The agency still exists. There's still a statute that says the agency exists. There's still statutes that say what functions exist. So that's sort of one of our arguments. Another argument is about these accepted employees. It is just frivolous to say, hey, we have the right to sort of carve out these narrow band of employees who are protecting life and property. And we're also going to carve out as essential these HR employees who can issue RIF notices. How is issuing a reduction in force notice important to save life or property? It's bizarre, and it's sort of, there's no hiding what they're doing here. And then finally, there's many other sort of technical arguments why these are unlawful, but one other large argument is, so under the Administrative Procedures Act, this is a law that governs how agencies and how the government in general issues actions and takes actions. Decision-making has to be reasoned, right? It can't be frivolous, it can't be arbitrary, it can't be for unlawful reasons, right? Like if you're engaging in a reduction in force, there has to be a valid reason for that reduction in force. Here, the administration is not even hiding the fact that what they're doing is they're terminating employees as a political game, right? They're using our members, they're using federal employees as political pawns, right? And that is not reasoned decision making. And so we've made all of those arguments, and we've filed a TRO to try and get the courts to stop these RIFs from continuing under these unlawful premises.
Okay. So just to recap, about 4,200 people already, there may be more, have been essentially fired. And the Constitution, the Administrative Procedures Act, other statutory law says you cannot do this, and yet they are doing it anyway. The president keeps saying something else, and the administration keeps doing something else that is very telling. He keeps saying we're going to get rid of Democrat programs. He then has postings on HUD and on other agencies. Essentially, we're closed because of the Democrats. This is all politicization. This is all Hatch Act. You're not supposed to use the government to further your political views. No president has tried this before. How does that kind of vehemence and partisanship play into the lawsuit? And will the judge take notice of that and say, okay, we're not going to allow that?
Yes. So all of this background, again, and it shows and it reveals that this is not reasoned decision making, right? This is a political game, and that's not permitted, right? OMB can't be using federal employees' livelihoods, and even more so, can't be using the services that Americans need for political games, right? And that's what they're doing. And this is sort of revealing of that. And we believe the judge will consider that information. That's been put in our briefing. One note on that, yes, the government filed their opposition to our request for a TRO on Friday, and they barely tried to argue against the substance in our arguments, right? They're making jurisdictional arguments. They're making arguments about harm, which we think, again, are weak arguments on their side. But they barely even touched on the fact that they are violating the Anti-Deficiency Act, that they're violating the Administrative Procedures Act, because we think they know they're wrong, right? They know
Right.
they're acting unlawfully here.
Right. What is kind of fascinating about all of this is the brazenness. Has any other administration, Republican, Democratic, ever tried anything like this before?
Not a one, not even the Trump administration during his
Right.
first term.
Right. And what do you hope the judge can do tomorrow? It's interesting, by the way, that the judge agreed to move up the hearing, which is probably a good sign that he sees some urgency in the matter. Do you hope that he has an order that covers just these employees, perhaps a broader order that says you can't fire anyone? What are you looking for?
Yes, so things have changed since we first filed our TRO, because when we first filed our TRO, the RIF notices hadn't gone out at all. So our primary request was to stop the government from issuing any reduction in force notices. And so that is still our primary request. We don't want the administration to issue any additional unlawful RIF notices. And part of that is because of the hardship it creates for these employees, right? When
Right.
you receive a RIF notice, you're being told, hey, in 30 days or 60 days, you are being fired. If you have a family, if you have, a life here in wherever you're working, you may have to sell your house. You may have to start looking for new jobs, unenroll your children from school, or childcare, and all of those harms are they're immense, right? Just by receiving that notice. And so we don't want further notices to go out. We're also going to ask the judge to make sure that these additional notices that go out, that have gone out, sorry, the notices that have gone out, that they're paused, right? And this is to be clear, this is a TRO hearing, right? So a TRO is emergency, like is the quickest emergency relief you can get. And so the relief would last up to 14 days, generally speaking. And then we will take that time to further our arguments and to ask for additional relief.
Gotcha. Now, one last question, Rashab. The president the other day said, "Oh, I'm going to pay a whole bunch of employees in the Defense Department." Where does that come from? We just got finished saying there's two categories of employees, furloughed employees and essential employees, and the essential employees don't get paid. What is going on here?
More political games, right? And actually, while we got on this Zoom, Russ Vogt made another tweet, or rather, it wasn't even Russ Vogt himself. It was the actual official account, I believe, of the Office of Management and Budget, and it says OMB is making every preparation to batten down the hatches and ride out the Democrats' intransigence, pay the troops, pay law enforcement, continue the rifts. So it's clear political games here, right? And
Absolutely.
that's, whatever side you support, whether or not you believe the Republicans are right on the shutdown or the Democrats are right on the shutdown, it doesn't matter. You shouldn't be using federal employees and Americans, in fact, because of these services, for these political games. And I'll just note, these federal employees are not, people think of federal employees as people in DC and people in, white collar jobs. No, these are federal employees throughout the government working, all over the country. One unit of our employees are GS4 employees, so relatively low paid employees working in Tucson, Arizona, manning a call center, and we found out that they were riffed under these premises, right? So this is affecting a broad group of people across all ideological lines, and it's just unfair and wrong.
I would just point out two things, actually three things, contrarians. First, these people don't know what they're doing. They, of course, fired a bunch of CDC employees and then had to bring them back because, whoops, We really do need these people. Second of all, I think Rashab is going to take that tweet and go right back to court and add on another exhibit. And last thing, contrarians, your paid subscriptions are helping this lawsuit. You want to see how this works? Norm, who is with Democracy Defenders, is part of the litigation team here. So we are fighting for you, Rashab, for employees, and for a constitutional system in which a president doesn't get to pick and choose and use people as hostages and use people for vindictive purposes. So contrarians, this is all about you. And tomorrow we're going to find out, Rashab, best of luck. I suspect you're going to be successful. You have an excellent judge there and a great counsel as well. So thank you for joining us, and we will have you back soon to keep track of what's going on.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the support of the contrarians and all that Democracy Defenders Fund and you and Norm do. Thank you so much.